Hi, it's Bethany. I'm a lower elementary Montessori teacher, and I gave a live talk on July 27th, 2024, all about my scope and sequence and how I see the scope and sequence of lower elementary Montessori. Here is a video from the recording. We are going to talk about the cultural subjects, and how I see the cultural subjects are this way. I see history, botany, zoology, geography, and science. Um, Presentations are typically done in large groups, but with different follow-up works for each grade level. So I put botany and zoology together because they flip back and forth, is how I like to do it, and we'll talk about that here in a few minutes. So, how I typically present is not maybe, but how I try to follow it, because whereas with the maps, I follow the child for their math and language because everyone's at a different point. With the cultural, I have lists that I will put up, but there's no maps to follow because it kind of changes every year. Things add on, or you do different um, different topics each time. So how I typically do is maybe Monday history, Tuesday botany or zoology, Wednesday geography, and then Thursday science. And then Friday for my class is kind of like a catch up, do other works type of day. And also, I'll talk a little bit about this more in a bit about science, how I might change it a little bit this year. So I like to do the cultural subjects in seasons, and just to add a little bit to this for examples, and following what my seasons are, where you live might be a little bit different. But for summer, I like to do like a solar oven type of activity, whether that be in August or in the end of the school year in May or June. So that is a great way to come all together and do a project together for the cultural. Most culturals are all together. And then so for an autumn, I like to do either like pumpkin seeds and the shapes and types of leaves, something that goes with the season, if that makes sense. And for example, like winter, Antarctica, spring, flowers, different things like that. So matching up the cultural subjects to the seasons also help when you are planning your cultural for the year. But first, we're going to talk about history, and this is my favorite timeline of life, and I'll talk about it here in a second. But usually, history starts out with the Great Lesson, so the Big Bang, and then the evolution of life on the timeline. And so, some teachers do it where they do all the great lessons the first week. Typically, I'll do a few throughout the year. I think this year I might try to do them all in one week just to see, because I haven't done it that way before. I know some people say don't let the kids do anything until they hear these presentations. That's very an interesting way. I don't do that. But the great lessons, just like the language and math, I'm going to try to do them all in one week this year at the beginning, but I do like to spread them out throughout the year typically. And so this is the timeline of life that I like to use. It's actually the guest speaker's timeline of life. And I just, I wasn't a super fan of the one I got from my training, and I like this one because it looked like it came from like an old chest, like what it's meant to be, something that's old and a timeline of life, right? So, I'll talk a little bit about this for follow-up. I know some people say, well, this is a second grade work. I don't do that. I like to present every year a lot of the same concepts, but with different follow-up works that I'll talk about. For example, the first years could draw pictures from this. They could place, I know some timelines come with the pieces you could put on it. Um, the older kids can break up the eras, like the Paleozoic, Mesozoic, things like that. They could see the travel through and see what was made the evolution through life and things like that. So there's a bunch of different follow-up activities for this work. And then, of course, the other great lessons, right? And then the other thing that's in history is like the basic human needs through the ages. And this year we actually did a year-long project. Here's a few pictures from it at the very beginning stages of the year-long project where each kid picked a period of history, whether that be Greeks or Middle Ages, Renaissance, people today, things like that, and they made a little human. And then when we went through each basic human need, for example, shelter, that looked different for everybody's diorama box. So that was a fun way to have a cultural project. And we did about one a month. So we kept adding every month to our box. And that was a lot of fun. So that's a great year-long project. I've also done a year-long project about rocks. And we did one thing a month with the different rocks because I also love rocks. And again, it goes back to that what you love, the kids will also be excited for, but then also they're excited for stuff. So then I try to bring in stuff they're excited for too. Um, Now we're going to talk about botany and zoology. So I do mine kind of like again, it's flipping back and forth with this is what the list also looks like that I'll put up there as well. So zoology, botany, zoology, botany. And when it says like plants, or excuse me, mammals, fish, amphibians, those are the different parts of the animals. And I'll talk about that here in a second. I make these little folder cards. I have a video about how I make these ones and also for the botany. Usually I just shove them all to the side in this thing, but this year I had displayed them that way. It looks a little bit different now. Um, so I like my sequence of how I go through things because it matches up nicely with the different either the continents we talk about, which I'll talk here soon, or just lining it up with the year. My flow is nice for that one, at least for how I see it. And then for the different follow-up works for like the plants and the animals, mostly the animals, because there's so many vertebrates and then a lot of invertebrates. So for each one, I'll have the first graders do the three-part cards, the second graders do types of, and the third graders do research or projects or just, type of thing. They could also choose to do the other two, or maybe I have a third grader that hasn't seen the parts of the animal yet. So for the three-part cards, I know some people for the the three-part cards, do it where the first graders do the picture and the name, the second graders do it the picture, name, and definition, and then the third graders do it the picture, name, and write their own definition in their own words. Um, I feel by second grade, especially if they did the nomenclature cards for the vertebrates in early childhood, by second grade, I feel like they don't want to do three-part cards anymore. And not that I don't make them do them or make them do them, but not that I'm like, well, this is the follow-up work. There's other ways, just like with the researcher project, there's other ways to use the three-part cards where it's just them not doing the three-part cards. It's them using that information in another way. So you can lay them out and see them, but not necessarily going through the steps. I like the first years going through the steps of coloring in the picture, writing the name, and doing the definition because yeah, I do have them do the definition, or I trace, or I use a highlighter and they trace over it. So it gets them writing it if they can't read it, but they can practice reading it. I feel like first graders are the biggest do they know how to read things yet, or they're writing, like they're still getting those skills down, whereas the second and third graders typically have those skills down. So that's why I let them do different things. And then I have types of cards, and then the researcher project, whatever they want to do. If we're doing mammal and they want to research it, that's great. The first years, I also let them research if they want to do it. That's fine too, but they also have to do the three-part cards for the botany and zoology. And then for geography, this is the order in which I do the continent studies, but I know some schools I've heard do it like they do within the 3 years, do like about two a year. I like to do all of them every year because doing all of them every year shows them that there's all the seven continents, but also if a student doesn't stay past the first grade year or the second grade year, then they've gotten a good foundation from the first 2 years. So for geography, I start with North America because that is where I am located in the United States, but maybe you want to start with wherever you are located. And then we talk about South America and then Europe. And just to give you a timeline or like a sequence, I do them about like a month or like 5 to 6 weeks each throughout the school year. So North America will be at the beginning, South America, and then usually by November, where I do live in the United States, so I celebrate Thanksgiving. I like to do um Europe then, so I could talk about how, the people came to America from Europe. Um, and then Antarctica happens to be in December and January, or like the snowy, colder months when it starts to get cold. So that one's an obvious connection. And then Asia, there's some cultural events that happen in January, February that tie nicely into Asia. And then Africa, and then Australia. And then I noticed that I put all the A ones at the end, which I thought was just interesting. Um, and this is how I've done it for multiple years now, and it works out very nicely. And so what do I do with all of those? So I'll do the map first, like an information card about the continent we're studying that time. We'll do the map because I even like for North America, there's less countries on the map. So sometimes what I'll do is first grade will do the North America map, second grade will do the Canada map, and then third grade will do the United States map, even though that's also like an upper L thing, but they could still do it because some of them did that in the early childhood. So I'd like to do that for North America, but typically it's just the regular map because even by third grade, maybe South America, they'll know most of them, but like Europe, there's a lot of little countries in there where they're not going to remember them all. So doing the map every year is a good reiteration and practice for that. And then we talk about the animals. I just have cards for these ones with the name and the picture and a name of different animals located on those continents. And then also kids can research about this. Whoever wants to do it can do that as well. Plants, flags. The kids love flags. If I don't know if yours do too, but a lot of the students I have love the flags. And just seeing the different colors and drawing their own flags from the country's flags. And then either cultural activities or landmarks will do. So maybe different dances or different foods from places or famous landmarks that are from that country, the countries in those continents. And then the research. They can always do research about anything that they see here. Maybe they want to research a specific country within that continent, and that's always an interesting way to do it too. So now other geography topics, land and water forms, mountains, like the parts of the mountains, the rivers, the earth and globe studies, etc. There's quite a few geography things that the kids get to go through. And now science, here's a picture of science, like a microscope type of thing, but it's not a microscope, but it enlarges it for the students. So science is like universe and space. The Montessori experiments, if you have those cards, I'll tell you how I'm going to do them this year. Like different forces in science, like gravity, etc. And then the nitrogen cycle, carbon cycle, and then the rock cycle, which is my favorite. I love the rock cycle. It's one of my favorite cultural works. And how I think I'm going to do it this year. Previously, we would do like mostly science all together, but I've heard of people doing science experiments where they have all the materials for all the different experiments they have out, and the kids can just choose whichever ones they want. Now, I'm not going to do it that way because I won't have all of the materials out all the time, but what I'm going to do is pick one experiment for the week and show it on Monday. So that's why I said maybe science, when I explained in the beginning my days for when I present things, science is going to be probably the Monday thing. And sometimes I'm going to show them what they're doing. And sometimes I will just say, okay, here's the experiment. Try to follow the directions to see what the outcome is, which I think will be interesting. So I'm going to have one a week. So once I get everything in place for that, I'll also put those up as like a science list. I do have a science list already, but they're not experiments. They're the science concepts that I teach throughout the year. But I think the experiments will be nice so the kids can see more experiments and have more of an option of when to do them. So maybe if I show them Monday, they'll do it Wednesday, things like that. Um, Okay, and now we have practical life, which is part of cultural and it's something we do teach in Montessori. And it's more of an early childhood thing, but this year I want to bring it more into elementary and have a shelf for it. What I am thinking about doing um is this because usually I do a lot of cooking because I have a oven and a stove in my classroom and a whole refrigerator and a microwave and it's a whole kitchen in my class. So I do a lot of cooking and baking with them. And just cleaning of the classroom used to just be our practical life things, but I wanted to add more into that. So I am going to have a shelf and I could add it as like a daily work to their daily work plan, but I don't want kids to just or my students to just pick that first, right? I don't want them to have the option maybe do a few works first, and if you need like a structured break, do a practical life activity, or when you finish a work that's larger, do a practical life. So by the end of the month, they'll have finished their own checklist for that. And when I do the monthly ones, I'll put that up. Oopsie, I forgot that out. That's okay. And then, so the basic ones that I'll put up, there's like tying shoes, zipping, and writing letters. I think it will be fun to have the kids actually put a stamp on a letter and send it through the school mailbox to their house. And then different health activities. I don't know if I could think of anything more practical in life because we have to stay healthy, we have to do things. So like learning different movement exercises, there's so many names for things. And just like the simple ones like jumping jacks or ways to stay healthy, different kid-friendly yoga poses. I think it would be fun because I kind of like badminton. It's a simple one, but we also have a basketball hoop. They could practice basketball, but they do that at recess. But just like I have a door outside to our fenced-in playground, so the kids can just step outside. I'll watch them. They could play badminton and just practice that because it's a practical life thing, and they might never else, like never ever have the opportunity to play badminton in their life, but it could be. And if they started practicing now, they'll say, hey, when I was a kid, we played badminton, type of things like that. But also contra dancing. Now, this is a whole group thing. I like contra dancing, which is kind of like line dancing or square dancing, but there's certain moves you do, and it's just a good way to one, remember moves, have some body coordination, that type of thing to practice when you're young. And then I think it would be fun to do some juggling for the hand-eye coordination. And I think it will give the kids a way because some students, if you notice, are very good at everything. So it's like, well, maybe if they do juggling, it might cause them to have to like practice at it or something just to practice for them to be good at it. So it's also helping that practical life skill. And then music. Unfortunately, my school doesn't have a music program, so I hope your school does. But the music to me is like the rhythms and reading the notes. So if they play a like the treble and bass clef note, so if they play an instrument later on, then they can learn the stuff now, try to get just like a basic understanding. So what I think I'm going to do with that for the music is um like have one or two through the month and then work in a sequence throughout the year for music. And the same with Spanish. So I do speak Spanish. I have a bachelor's degree in Spanish, and it's my favorite. That must be, I love grammar, so that's also why I did the Spanish. Love the grammar of like all languages and learning the grammar. But I want to make a thing because I do Spanish with my students. But last year, an Italian teacher came in, so the kids were learning Italian. Um, but this year on the practical life shelf, I'm going to put one or two Spanish concepts that they could practice through and through the whole school year, and we'll see how far we get with that because again, it's the age of socialization and learning languages from a young age is great. Um, and then cooking to follow directions by themselves. I'm still going to do whole group cooking lessons. It's just, I want them to be able to follow a simple recipe from a recipe card all by themselves. Maybe like I know a lot of people can't do peanut butter anymore because peanut butter and jelly would be a good one for that. But maybe like maybe crackers and cheese and a cracker or different things like that. Maybe just it's as simple as wash the grape and then bring it to your table and cut the grape in half. That could combine fractions, different or measuring out like a bowl of cereal or a certain amount of crackers, that type of thing, for like so they can follow it and do it by themselves. Whereas in the group we follow the directions, but they I lead them through it, right? And then other practical life. So I mentioned the knowledge fair. So what the knowledge fair is like a science fair, but the students pick one topic and make a book from it. I have done, and sometimes schools, the first school I worked at, I didn't do a science fair because the upper elementary kids did it. But my students get to do a science fair, and I did it the first year as a regular board science, but now I make it into a book where the kids take like a 8.5, like a regular piece of paper, and then we divide it in half and they write their stuff on both. And then I laminate it and then we book bind it. So they have a little book to present. And it's very cute what they pick, and the people like hearing the kids read about it from their book. So the knowledge fair, it's like a science fair, but a little different. I also have a YouTube video about that one. And then the class play, it's one of my favorite parts of the year. It's a great community building skill. The students decide the plots, the characters, the props, and the scripts. So we do it in, it's never about like winter, unless we do one about seasons, but it's in December, right before we go on break. So either like the second or third week of December, we will invite the parents in and watch the class play that lasts like 20 minutes ish. And then I have like cookies, and the people can eat cookies with their kids and say, good job, you know? So what we do at the end of October, the beginning of November, we all sit down and we say, okay, what do we want our class play to be about? And then we talk about different plots, we vote on different plots, we talk about characters, the props, the scripts, and they all come together, work together. That, and a good way to include everybody as a character, I will say, is, for example, um, for example, um, I have um an example is, so one year we did a missing present and we traveled through the different continents. So they ran into somebody at every single continent. So there were like 2 or 3 main people, and then at each continent, another student was the person, or another 2 students were in that continent. So breaking it up like that so that everybody has a turn to be in the play. But also we did one where we time traveled through different periods. The same year we did the basic human needs presentation or year-long project. The kids traveled throughout time and looked for a friend, and that was just a great way. So kids were in different time periods, and we did different activities at each time period, and it was great. And the parents always love it, and it's a great way. Even the students that are more reserved, um, we'll do it. Now, of course, you don't have to say, like, if the kids don't want to be in it, that's okay too. I've had non-speaking roles, but they still go up there and do it, or maybe they want to do props or something. So, either way, everybody gets involved, but it's also a part of that Montessori that gives us the voice to say, hey, I'm going to be able to stand in front of a crowd and talk to people because they're not thinking about it at such a young age, you know? So that's one for practical life. Oh wait, there's a picture of it. This was the South America. They did the rainforest when we did the picture. I'm lucky enough to have a small stage at my school, so that's how we do it at that. But you could also do it in your classroom and just have like a class play.
Thank you for watching. Go ahead and click the link below if you would like to see more information about my scope and sequence and maps, my free hub of Montessori resources, and my Montessori activities, which also has Montessori resources for your classroom. Thank you.